So we are infinite and eternal and stuffed into these little tiny temporary bodies. So naturally, everything that we see and perceive and experience happens through our own egoic view. We experience life through our own eyes, we experience it through our own senses, our own feelings, our own mental filters. Color our perception of everything. And as you probably know, this has led to a lot of problems in the world. Not because we see things from our own perspective, but because we make this assumption that our perspective is correct. So all of the narrow views that oppress people, that limit people, that create harm for others, it all arises out of this egoic view. And no one is immune. You know, that's a real danger of the spiritual path as people start to meditate and they start to feel that expansiveness. They begin to recognize this intelligent light that we are, that is everything, that there's no separation. And then we translate that experience into our finite bodies, our limited egoic view. And there are those that will then profess, no, this is the way, this is how everyone should view life, and if everyone just did this, then there would be peace on earth. And while that's true, that's just as oppressive as any other view. So that's not the answer. The answer is not taking our view, our personal view, and pushing it on others. But what does help is if we start to break free of our own ego view. And we're always stretching this view. We're always growing and changing. And one of the probably most easiest way to do it is simple exposure to other ways of being, other cultures. That's why oftentimes people who travel extensively are generally more open-minded, simply because they have put themselves in situations where they could not help but see that somebody lives differently than they do. And it's not better or worse, it's just different. It's like, oh, that's how you do it. Oh, that's how you cook your eggs. I like my eggs this way, but you like your eggs that way. And that doesn't mean like suddenly you have to eat your eggs the way somebody else does. But it breaks open the idea that there's another way that's equally as interesting. So this is a big component of the spiritual path, is first noticing and becoming aware of these egoic views where we reach a line and we recognize that, oh, this is how I've always thought this worked this way. And then suddenly we start to see things in a different perspective. We become a little more open to a different viewpoint. And internally, our actual vibration of our being changes. Now, we're in America, in the United States, and people like things done fast. We want results now. So we might get on the spiritual path, start meditating, start practicing mindfulness, paying attention to how our mind works. Maybe start to play a little mind training game where it's like, okay, I see my mind caught up in this cycling thought that is not productive, it's not happy, it's not progressive, so let me change it by focusing on beauty or gratitude. And you play this beauty and gratitude game where you actually start altering the filter of your mind. And then you start to notice more things that bring you feelings of gratitude, more things that are beautiful in the world. And suddenly you wake up one day and realize that, oh, my whole view has shifted. And we feel happy for no reason. We're just like, oh, I'm just actually feeling good and happy. And you have this awareness of like, oh, it's because I focus on beauty and gratitude all the time. So now you have this view that this worked for me, so now it's got to work for everybody. So it's like you run into your friend who maybe is having a rough day, and so of course you're like, just focus on beauty and gratitude, you'll feel better, just do it. Or you're just around them and you're just vibrating with joy and happiness, and you can't contain it, and it can feel very exciting and wonderful, but it can be challenging because if the people who are around you are not also on the path, who are not also interested in being happy, maybe they're more interested in their dramas. Maybe they really like a good sad story. Maybe they like their suffering. Everybody's different. So when you have that meeting, it can be very uncomfortable for both of you. And there's a tendency to try and force people into our view. And again, we're back at that same problem of trying to push our view on others. So we have a couple options as we are breaking free of our egoic views. We can do it really fast and just decide, okay, I'm just going to live this bright, magnificent life and nothing's going to stand in my way, and I'm just going to go 1,000%, million miles an hour, and this will be my life. And I did that. It was fun. But it also was very, very disruptive. It causes friendships to end. It causes every single relationship that you have to change. Like, I didn't even talk to my family for 6 months because every time they called me, they were in the habit of just calling up to complain. And that was all they were interested in. And even though I kept pushing on, I'm like, no, where's the gratitude? Where's the beauty? What good thing happened to you? But they were just in, the cycle of like, no, life is hard. It's painful, and you should be painful too, and you should be miserable too. And I had already decided that no, spiritual practice is my life, so I'm letting everything go, total renunciation. But that's not required for everyone. You don't have to make that choice. There's another option. The other option is much more gentle. We go slower in that we make greater allowances for ourselves and for others. And this other way actually has a huge benefit, that it really teaches us tolerance, which is a key component. So that was a piece that on this spiral of a path that takes us around in these circles where we come back to the same thing that we thought we had already mastered. And then we find there's a little bit more to master. So for me, what happened is when I came back around to this tolerance piece, I realized that, oh, I didn't really learn that the first time. I just learned how to hold my energy in such a way that no matter what state somebody else was in, it didn't matter. I could just block it. But now it's like that creates a very limited life, right? Because now if I spend too much time with somebody who's in a dark place, it chips away at that wall. It gets heavier and heavier. So then I had to learn a different way. I had to really embrace this tolerance piece, where it's like, okay, maybe just trying to shoot for the moon right away isn't quite as efficient. So the other option is to allow this gentleness to start to pervade your life, this sense of tolerance, that you can have this amazing, bright, happy view and drop the expectation that others want that too. Which is, like I said, requires a lot of tolerance, because we have to become comfortable with this idea that others are not ready to leave their misery, that they're going to go through their dramas, that they're going to have rough days where you can just look at it and be like, if you just tweaked your mind just a little bit, if you just looked at it from this angle, it would be completely different. And it's not that you're withholding that information, it's you're becoming tolerant to their discomfort, even though it makes you uncomfortable. And it also builds a great deal of patience, because as we are watching with compassion, we look for the opening. We wait patiently and see if there ever is going to be an opening. And then maybe at some point they kind of notice, like, hey, why are you so happy? Why doesn't life, weigh you down? What's going on? And at that point, you share your view. You share that, oh, well, when I run into the situation that you're facing, this is what I do. Instead, I look for the beauty, I look for the gratitude. And that takes me out of the suffering and allows me to see the problem from a different angle. So, again, it's your choice of how you're going to travel this path. One way is not better than another. One way is not correct. It's just different options, and we might do different ones at different times. We might have been running with a group of people and spending a lot of time with them, and we just realize that we've changed, and maybe we don't want the same experiences anymore. When I started my path, I was still in college, and I had a group of friends who their life was the bar. If they weren't at work, they would go to the bar, shoot pool, drink beer, and that was life for them. And then I realized that, I want more. I don't want that. So I went away for a while. And then 10 years later, I come back, and guess what? They're the same people at the same bar stools. It's like, wow. So, yeah, and they're having the same conversations. So it was very interesting for me to dip back into that world and see, like, oh, interesting. And it doesn't mean that they're doing it wrong. Of course not. That's just what they wanted out of life at that point, or that's what they thought they could have And that's the interesting thing that happens the more we meditate, the more we practice mindfulness, is the idea of what we can have expands. Suddenly, the track that we were on becomes evident that, oh, that's just one option. Like, we don't have to do that if it doesn't feel right, if it's not bringing me to a happier and brighter state of being. You start to see these other options that can feel a little scary to explore, because again, you have this whole social support system who's all going down this one track, and then you see this other way. So it's okay to like take a few steps down that other way and see who's there, see who's around. And it doesn't mean that you'll never ever talk to the other people again. It just means that you're open to maybe meeting other people, creating other support systems. So this breaking free of egoic views at times can feel very confusing. It can feel lonely. It can feel out of control. So keep that in mind as you practice, because we shift and grow every time we meditate. We go into silence, and that is where everything becomes unglued. You know, we've spent this entire life building this ego structure, building and creating and refining these views that have kept us safe, that have provided for our physical needs, our emotional needs, our mental needs, and have allowed us to be present. So it's not like some of the books say that, you know, you have to kill the ego's bad. That's a misinterpretation. We can't function as a relative being in a physical world without ego. But the ego is also not the one in charge. Those views that you have worked so hard to build are not the end-all be-all. They're just a structure that facilitates these relative engagements that we have, these relative experiences that allow us to relate to one another, to the world, to our concept of self. So one way to think about it that can be helpful is the ego is a really great secretary or administrative assistant. They're an administrator. So they're really helpful at knowing where things go and what tools to pull up and use. But as far as what options are actually available, what creative inspiration can be accessed, that doesn't happen through the ego. That happens through that deeper, higher, infinite, intelligent light that we are, which is not separate from anything that we experience. So we don't want to destroy all of our views. That's not the point. The point is to start to see and recognize that the views that you hold, the structures through which you experience life, are not fixed. And as I talked a little bit about at the beginning, one of the ways that we can see this almost immediately is playing this gratitude beauty game, where we check in with ourselves and say, what's my mind doing right now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Does it feel good? If it does, then just keep paying attention. If you feel happy and content and you're enjoying life, then wonderful, just keep enjoying, but keep paying attention. That doesn't mean you just start to coast and space out and forget, because then when you hit a bump, you won't notice. So instead, you just keep paying attention. And then when you do hit a bump, something knocks you off balance. And now all of a sudden you notice that, oh, I'm feeling kind of annoyed. Maybe a little frustrated. Or maybe you're just noticing that suddenly things are not going the way that you planned. This isn't what I wanted to do. Or maybe it's just more generalized and there's just this sense of discontent, this unsatisfactoriness, this dukkha that Buddha talked about, where maybe you just can't point to any particular thing, but there's just this heavy feeling like, hey, there's something off. And when that's the case, whether it's just that very subtle kind of feeling off, or it's a very blatant, I'm in the gutter, I'm just like raging, super upset, I just yelled at somebody, or maybe you're driving, just screamed at the person in front of you, and you catch yourself. Take that moment to really notice how it feels, because that's important. It's uncomfortable, but it's supposed to be, because this is how we learn. This is the equivalent to noticing how it feels when we touch the hot stove and our fingers burn. Because guess what? You touch this hot thing once and now you know. Like, you get near it and then you just pull your hand away. You don't have to think about it. So this paying attention to those very uncomfortable states of being angry, frustrated, jealous, hateful, saying, I don't want this. We call those the poisons. So if we notice that our mind has been imbibing in poison, then we use this game of beauty or gratitude, where we say, okay, I fully acknowledge that I'm in the gutter right now. I'm going to look in my immediate surroundings and find something that's beautiful. And maybe it's the color of the carpet, this lovely golden wheat color. It's just very beautiful. And we just keep focusing on that beauty. Or maybe everything's ugly, like just because we're in that state where we're just like, no, everything's bad, don't like anything. Then there's always gratitude for breathing. Just say, oh, I can breathe. Even if we're on a medically assisted device. If we're alive, we're breathing. So that one I can guarantee that's always available. And just feeling gratitude for the breath. And then, of course, the mind will come up with the story of why you should maintain that egoic view that you had. That anger, maybe somebody just cut you off and you almost got in a car accident, so your adrenaline's pumping, and that person was completely at fault, and so you're really angry and you're justified, and so as you're trying to admire the beautiful color of the car that cut you off, your mind will fight you and say, no, I should be angry. I deserve to be angry. And it's like, well, what a horrible thing to deserve. to be angry. You're better than that. Everyone deserves better than that. So counteract the story by just returning to this game of you just keep focusing on beauty, keep focusing on gratitude, one of those. And you might have to do it 100 times. Might have maybe only 10. But pay attention through the whole process. And this really cool thing happens. Your mind, that view, the viewer through which you're looking, actually shifts as dramatically as putting on a pair of sunglasses or taking them off. Just all of a sudden, most people don't notice it because it's very gradual, because we have the argument of like why we should feel miserable, and then you're like, no, I'm going to play this weird game. I'm just going to focus on gratitude or beauty. And then all of a sudden, as you're paying attention, you start to feel a little lighter. And that story that was so big gets a little quieter, it's a little smaller. And if it was a problem that you actually have to deal with, it's not going to magically go away. It'd still be there. But you will have shifted. So now that you're looking at the problem from a whole different perspective, from this place of openness, the mind actually shifts into this state of beauty or gratitude. And in these higher states, where you're not pounding down the poison of the repetitive thought of why you should be miserable, thought slows naturally. There's just not a lot to think about when we're happy. We're just enjoying. And then whatever the problem is that we have to deal with, we can turn our attention back to it from this new perspective and see things from a different angle. And many times the solution, the thing that we actually need to do, is so obvious. It's like, oh, I just need to put my foot here. Or, oh, I just need to send this one email. Or, oh, I just need to close this loop. I need closure to this relationship. And then we can follow through with that action, because now our energy is not being sucked away by that miserable state. And in doing so, we break through that view. So we do it in these little bits, with these very ordinary moments. And over time, when we've done that 12 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, we realize that the mind state through which we're experiencing life is not fixed. It feels that way because that provides our being a sense of continuity and safety and security. We're using these views that we hold onto so tightly as a support. But they're not fixed. You don't have to be bound by any view. But again, they're helpful. These egoic structures, this filter through which we experience the world, is necessary, because otherwise we're just experiencing the infinitude of being. And everything is one. And there's no relation. There's no reference point. And it's wonderful. But if you also want to have life in a body, that means taking that infinitude of being and stuffing it into this little finite structure, which then you have to have different templates through which you view the world. So these mind states that arise, that allow us to make sense of the world and relate to it, are nothing more than the little screen in a Viewmaster. I don't know, I'm dating myself, but I don't know if any of you guys know what a Viewmaster is. It's like this little toy, and it had a little wheel of different images, and you'd put it in and look through the viewer, and you click the button, and you'd have a view of a sunset. And you click the button again, and then you'd be looking at a windmill, and you click it again, and you'd have a different view. That's all your mind states are. That's all these egoic views are little screens inside a Viewmaster. And we take a lot of energy to create and build these certain views. But that's the good news, because that means you can then curate them for yourself. That means that you can choose how to view the world at any moment. So even if you're stuck in the gutter, you don't have to stay there. That's where, like I said, that beauty and gratitude training really help. That's where meditation, actually sitting in silence and just allowing yourself to experience awareness of awareness. Just becoming aware of the awareness that is experiencing the view. Melts down all these structures, all these fixations, and it frees us to make these choices. So try that, play with it, see where it brings you. And again, you don't have to make this 1000% commitment to the new view and completely disrupt your life. Some people do, and that's fine. If that's what you want to do, then do it. But you don't have to. You can do it slowly and gently and begin to transform and allow those parts of your life that you no longer relate to in a positive way to naturally start to fall away. There's no need to rush or to push or to force anything. So let's meditate.